Okay, a very good day I would like to wish to all of you. So today's webinar is going to be very different because this is the time that I'm going to conduct it live. Yeah, basically previously it was all recorded. Yeah, so this time around, I believe that all of you are here to learn about how to devise a good and productive research proposal. Okay, and I hope that all of you are very excited, yeah, to learn about this. And even all of you who are not into research right now, it's okay. I hope that you can benefit as well. And hopefully you are also will be, it will spark the joy and passion for you to continue on your research. Yeah. And some of you are right now also undergraduate students, maybe most of you are also doing a final year project. This is the time for you to learn about how to write a good research proposal before you start off with your research. Okay, so before you start out your data collection and so forth. All right, so before I start with the presentation, for those of you who still do not know me, let me just introduce myself briefly. I'm Dr. Esther Hui, all right, and right now I'm currently affiliated to UTAR and specifically in the Faculty of Creative Industries, FCI, all right, and UTAR basically is University Tunku Abdul Rahman and located in Sungai Long, all right. So before we start with today's webinar, let me just draw the attention to the quotation on the slide. So just now, Miss Grace had actually introduced about the quotation, which I actually created. Okay, so this is my quotation, yeah? So research proposal is to write what everyone else has read, but to think what nobody else has thought. So what is meant by here, yeah? It means that, sometimes along the way, when you want to conduct a research, and if you want to write a research proposal and also later on to write a thesis after conducting your research, yeah, and also to write your journal publications, right? So in order for you to know what to write, you have to read a lot, right? You have to read from journal articles, past studies, using all the relevant resources, right? And from there, we will know what we intend to do and what we want to conduct for our research. So we will have to, think something very different from what we have read, okay, and see whether other studies have been done on our areas or not, and what could we actually do, yeah, to contribute something different to the society or the community, or maybe changing something about the system. Okay, so in order for us to do a research, definitely there's a problem. So for us to do to solve the problem, conduct a research to solve the issue. Right? Okay, so let us just move on further. So for research, yeah, there are different types of research designs. Okay, so from the one that is on the slide, okay, we have experimental, we have historical, we have ethnographic, action research, okay, survey, correlational, and causal comparative. I'm sure there are also other research designs as well, okay, which I'm not going to touch about this. Yeah, which we need to actually read on further for all the types of research designs in order for us to know what to do for our research. All right, so let me now draw your attention to the webinar objectives. Okay, so in this webinar, there are 3 objectives to be conveyed. Okay, and hopefully all of you will be able to know, okay, what to accomplish in order for you to actually learn how to write a good research proposal. Sorry about that, I clicked too fast. Okay, yeah, so there are 3 webinar objectives. So firstly is to help all of you to know the elements of a good research proposal. Okay, in this case, you'll be able to, we will actually know, okay, what to write and what not to write in a research proposal. Okay, and then secondly is to ensure that all of you are able to write well in each section. Okay, so technically in each section, there are certain parts that you need to write in order for you to convey your thoughts clearly, precisely, and concisely. Okay, so in this case, what should we actually write? Yeah, so what we should actually articulate in this part. Okay, so hopefully in this webinar, you'll be able to learn about this. And lastly is to provide all of you with guidance about the way in presenting your research proposal well. Okay, this is particularly very important for you to guide you before presenting your proposal defense or proposal presentation. So this is good enough for you to actually know, and in order for you to get prepared for your presentation, and proposal defense will be good enough If your proposal defense is good, then you are able to conduct your research. If not, then that is a bad thing, yeah, because if your proposal defense is not approved, or if you don't pass your proposal defense, you are not able to conduct your research. Okay, so this is very crucial, especially writing your research proposal. Okay, let us just move forward. Okay, so there are steps in writing a good research proposal. First and foremost, hold on a second, yeah. Okay, first and foremost, yeah, so there are actually 10 steps, okay, that you can actually conduct for your research proposal, okay. So firstly, you have your title page and table of content, right? So it's very important for you to write your title, your research title clearly, okay, and formulate it properly, okay. So in my previous webinar, I mentioned about formulating good research titles, right? So in order for this good research title to be formulated well and clearly, we should also put all the variables or constructs that we're going to analyze in the research title. So normally it will be good if it has about 15 words, yeah, in the research title. But if it's more than that, when we read through, if it's more than 15 words, yeah, then the examiners or the readers might not even understand. Okay, if it's too many words in the research title, right, what are you going to actually analyze? So this is the very important thing because it's the first impression that counts. Okay, and then moving on, we should have a table of contents, right? So table of contents is where we clearly mention chapter 1 is about introduction, chapter 2 is about literature review, chapter 3 is about methodology, right? And in these different parts of chapters, there are sections, right? And then sections and subsections, right? In these sections and subsections, we should actually write the page numbers, okay? So that when the examiners or the readers want to read which part of the chapter, they will look at the table of contents and then it will clearly articulated in your research proposal, okay? Whatever that you have written. All right, let us just move forward. Okay, so the second step is the introduction. And in this introduction is where the examiners or readers will read and about your research topic. Okay, this is the part where we talk about the background of the study. Yeah, what constitutes the context of your study. Okay, so we need to explain your research title. Okay, telling us the story of your research. Okay, this is very important for us so that we are able to link to our problem statement. Okay, so basically right now, all of us are actually locked down during MCO, right? Movement control order, and also in other countries if you are not from Malaysia. Yeah, so most of the time right now, we are doing online learning and online teaching. Okay, so then basically, maybe blended learning will be one of the most important approaches for us to relate to the students, especially if you want to teach students online, right? So then, is actually blended learning important or not? Right? So we wouldn't know about this. Okay, so that is when we conduct this study, right? So we want to mention blended learning is a common scenario or common approach that we could actually use to teach students, to interact with the students, and also to engage the students in the classes, right? So then it happens everywhere, okay, all over the world, right? Okay, so we talk about this in general first, okay, talking about it, introducing your research topic, and then we narrow it down to your statement of problem. And that is where, if you want to conduct your study in Malaysia, so that is where blended learning will be conducted in Malaysia. And where is the location? Maybe you want to say it's like for me, I'm in Utah right now, so it's in Utah and so forth. Talking about it, blended learning maybe is not a common approach and so forth. Okay, so we narrow it down from introduction part and organize it well to be flowed to statement of problem. Okay, all right. And then for the fourth step is on the scope of study. And in this part, it's very important for us to narrow it down specifically. Okay, because we must know when we want to do a research, yeah, if you want to write a research proposal to conduct a research, we need not be too ambitious. Okay, we must remember that we are not changing the world. We are doing something to contribute something to the society because there's a problem. That's why we want to solve the problem, right? So it's a very minute thing. Okay, so then that is where we have to do the scope of the study. We narrow it down, narrow the focus. Okay, when we narrow down the focus, yeah, when you have all the variables that are stated. So for example, if your research question 1 is on the writer's awareness, okay, then we talk about the samples who are involved for this research question 1, and then talking about the data collection. Okay, so data collection involving how many respondents and using what, is it using past and so forth. So that's how you narrow it down. Okay, and if some other variables are not being analyzed in your research, take it out, omit it, delete it. Okay, so then you can make it specific. So scope of the study here is very important for you to get yourself focused, okay, specifically on what you intend to do. All right, and then moving on to the objectives of the study. And in this case, the objectives of the study are related to what you intend to do. Okay, so related to your research title. All right, so then objectives of the study. So just now earlier on, I gave the parts of the example of blended learning, right, to be used in the classroom. Okay, and then you can see that we want to basically conduct this research to analyze the efficiency and the importance of using blended learning as a tool to interact with students in the classroom, okay, in the online classroom. Okay, so that could be your objectives. Okay, so these are the variables that you are going to put in your objectives of the study or the aim of the study, right? Moving on further, then we have hypothesis or research questions. Now, for hypothesis is for quantitative study. Okay, so that is where we put hypothesis in, right? But for qualitative study, we don't have hypothesis, okay? We only have research questions. Okay, so if you have a mixed method research design, okay, if it's a combination of a qualitative and quantitative study, then we need to basically put the hypothesis in or the research questions in, okay, to complement what you intend to investigate, following what you have stated in the objectives of the study. Okay, right. So that is for introduction part. Okay, so moving on further for literature review. So for literature review is where we have to basically and concretely convey all the past studies that have been done before related to our research. Okay, and that is where we need to be very specific and exhaustive. Okay, and we need to also put on our thinking cap to know which parts that we actually need to include. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my study, my PhD study, because this is like the thing that I'm well known of, right? So I conducted the research on business news. Okay, so basically my research title is on writers' awareness, linguistics realizations, and readers' responses to meta-discourse features in Malaysian business news. Okay, so when I had to write about literature review, it had to be from general to specific. Okay, so business news is the general thing. So then I had to actually convey and make sure that I write the topics or studies that are related to business news first. Okay, so from business news, general, I make it very specific and narrow it down more, talking about meta-discourse features, because nobody knows what meta-discourse features are, right? So I had to mention meta-discourse features are what. Okay, then narrow it down more. Okay, talk about the writer's awareness. Okay, because it's stated in the research title. So whatever that is stated in the research title, the variables or the constructs need to be stated in your literature review as well. Okay, so writer's awareness, and then the linguistics realizations, and then the reader's responses. So that is where for the literature review, you need to be very specific, from general to specific, following the funnel. Okay, all right. And then moving on for methodology, this is where it's very, very important, it's imperative, because examiners will always find a lot of issues in methodology. And if we do not write it properly and construct it well, that is where our research might be problematic. So we need to mention this methodology specifically and make sure that it's concisely and precisely presented. Okay, right. Moving on further, and then we have limitations and delimitation of the study. Right, so for limitation, basically, when we have a methodology, right, we also, before we do the real data collection, it's advisable to conduct a pilot study, or is it another word is a pilot testing or preliminary study, to test out the methodology used to see whether this could actually be done in the research or not. Okay, and maybe along the way, when we have done the pilot study, we will get some problems, and that's where we talk about the limitations. And then the delimitations is where we talk about, the scope and how you narrow it down. Okay, and lastly, we have bibliography. And what is bibliography? I think most of you should know. Bibliography is like something like references. Yeah, basically your references. And it's very important because every time when we want to write a research proposal or a research thesis, likewise for any types of parts of papers when you want to submit for a journal publication, whatever that we have cited should be placed, okay, in your text, okay. And also when you put in the text, you need to put it in the reference section or reference list. Okay, likewise as well, some parts of the references, when you put in the reference list or sessions, it should also be in the text. Okay, because if not, if let's say you cite it in the text itself, in the proposal, but you didn't put it in the reference section, this is a crime already. We are plagiarizing people's work without knowing. Okay, and likewise as well, when you put in the reference list and we didn't put in the text, this is where we commit plagiarism. Okay, which means we're actually committing a sin and a crime. Okay, which we shouldn't do as a researcher. Okay, so this is very, very technical in that sense. Yeah, we need to make sure that we are aware about it. Okay, let us just move on further. Okay, so what is a proposal? So a proposal is a plan of action. Okay, now basically proposal, the root word of proposal is propose. We are proposing something, we are suggesting something, we are recommending something. That's why the word proposal. Okay, and we plan the action from the starting of the research up to the ending of the research. Okay, so how we want to do it, and when we want to propose, it doesn't mean that it's only following one plan. Okay, basically we have to be flexible. We shouldn't be rigid because it doesn't only follow plan A only. And if plan A doesn't work, we cry over it, cannot do anything, cannot move on. No, okay, we can actually have a backup plan. We can do plan B, plan C, plan D, and so forth. Likewise, like what I have shared in the previous webinar for composing constructive methodology, yeah, when I wanted to do my research for my PhD, I set to do a qualitative research, okay, because I'm not into quantitative area, okay. But then again, I changed my method altogether after reading a lot of materials from books, okay, from theses, from journal articles, and I changed my method from qualitative research to mixed method research design. Okay, so then we can change along the way. Okay, when you have problems, you can change. Okay, and that is where we need to read a lot in order to back up whatever claims that we have. All right, all right. Also, it's a prerequisite for research investigation. Okay, it's very important for us to write a research proposal that is clearly stated. Okay, so that we are able to know what to do for our data collection and what not to do for the data collection. So in a way, we need to know and organize our thoughts well. Okay, and this is the place where we can actually ask for feedback from your friends, okay, who are in your area, maybe to get the feedback. Okay, to get your supervisors. Okay, that is where you need to interact with your supervisors a lot to see whether it's approved or not. Okay, because supervisors definitely have experience more than us, right? When we were back then when we were students. Okay, and then also maybe get feedback from experts or researchers who are in your area. Okay, to see whether this research could be done or not. Okay, so we are proposing, not changing the world, but changing and contributing a little bit to the society or community. Okay, let us just move on. Okay, so it also, the research proposal also communicates the researcher's intention, okay, and makes clear the purpose of the intended study and its justification, as well as provides a step-by-step plan in conducting the study. Okay, this is particularly very important because whatever that we intend to do, we should write it out. Okay, because whatever that you will say in your research proposal is following your intention. Yeah, our intention as a researcher. And we must make sure that the purpose is clearly stated so that your research will have a clear objective and also problem statement. Okay, now, in order for you to conduct a problem statement, we must remember the problem statement should be related to your research title as well. Okay, so like for my case, business news, right? So my problem statement was about business news that is very plain, very dry, very boring. And I believe all of you will agree with me, right? Nobody reads business news. And that actually intrigued my curiosity to continue on of why I actually wanted to conduct on business news to help the writers. Yeah, I wanted to help the writers to make sure that business news will be read by people and preferred. So that is where my purpose statement is. Okay, and when I want to do my purpose, I mentioned about the strengths. I wanted to analyze what strengths and weaknesses that the business news writers make in writing business news. Okay, and then I also provide justification why I do it and so forth. So for example, if I have the research question 1, I want to do by writer's awareness, justify it. I would have to justify it. We should actually justify why are you doing this? Why are you analyzing this variable but not the other variable and so forth? So it's a step-by-step plan in conducting the study. All right. Let us move on further. Okay, so let me now explain to you thoroughly about the introduction of the research proposal. Okay, so introduction should provide the background of the research study. Okay, it should be in the way explaining the context of what you are researching on. Okay, explaining your variables and so forth. Okay, but in this case, it's general. Okay, you don't go specific. Okay, because you're just telling them in one glance. Okay, telling the readers in one glance what you're intending to do. Okay, and it should also may include a few subsections, right? Okay, so for introduction, normally you have like background of the study. Okay, problem statement, right? You all know the problem statement. And then we have the research objectives, right? And then research questions or hypotheses. Okay, significance of the study, who are your beneficiaries? Okay, and then definitions of key terms. So definition key terms are from your variables. What are you intending to analyze? Specify it before you move on to your chapter 2. Assuming that the readers do not know. Like for example, in my research, you all do not know what meta-discourse is. So I need to explain what a meta-discourse. Meta-discourse features are actually the ways to engage the readers, the text, as well as to convey the news across as clearly as possible to the readers. So then I justify it. I write it out and explain it in my definition of terms. Okay, so this introduction is particularly important because it's the first thing that they read. Okay, first thing that we read before we look at literature review and methodology. Okay, so it should be very clear. Moving on. Okay, so the purpose of the study, yeah, so that is where it states succinctly what the researcher proposes to investigate. Okay, so basically the aim, yeah, the objective that you are conducting this study. Okay, so I'm doing it. So basically for my PhD research, I am doing it because I wanted to help the business news writers to identify the strengths and weaknesses in business news. Okay, right. So the purpose should be a concise statement, providing a framework to which details are added later. Okay, so it's a concise statement altogether. It's not like, you know, very long-winded like a grandmother or a grandfather. Yeah, it's concise, very concrete. Okay, because it will relate to your framework. It will relate to your conceptual framework. Okay, and if you have an analytical framework in your methodology later on, you could also relate it and connect it to your analytical framework. Okay. Right, so then we have justification for the study. And this is where it's very important because we do not want to sound that we are very bold in our claim. Yeah, and most of the time back then when I was doing my PhD and master's and PhD technically, my supervisor said I always had this tendency of claiming very boldly things that, you know, very sure. Are you very sure about it? Yeah, I didn't support my studies, but are you sure about your claim? Then maybe like time by time I said business news are plain, dry, and boring. Are you sure? Yeah, so I had to basically back it up with claims and relevant resources to basically justify why I intend to do it. Okay, so these are the questions that we can ask ourselves, right? Have I identified the specific research problem that I want to investigate? Okay, what you want to do? Okay, so are you able to identify your research problem first? Okay, in order for you to solve the problem. Okay, right. And then have I indicated what I intend to do about this problem? Okay, so basically you have to reflect about this. Have I intended about that? Yeah. Okay, and then have I put forth an argument as to why this problem is worthy to be investigated? Yeah, am I able to justify rationally to the rest whether this is going to be done in a good manner or not? Okay, whether it's worthy to investigate. Okay, then maybe because most of the time they might say, okay, you have already read about this before. So why are you doing this? A lot of other people are doing it as well. So why are you doing this? Justify. Okay, make sure that you are doing something very different. Remember, everyone else has, we have read what everyone else has done, but we want to write basically from what you think that is different to contribute something. Okay, and then have I made my assumptions explicit? Okay, so basically, whatever that you assume, whatever that we assume in the research, are they able to be done properly or not? Okay, so for example, my assumption was that the business news writers will be able to help the writers to engage the news to the text. And then it was also in the way a good researcher back then, because then the business news writers were able to know the difference really on what to do and what not to do in writing business news. So then my assumption was explicit in that sense. Okay, so we need to make our assumption very explicit, not only implicit. It's clearly mentioned about this and rationalize why you are doing that. Okay. Okay, so problem to be investigated. Right. So we have the statement of the problem. Okay, and the statement of the problem is very crucial because in the problem statement, normally there are 3 elements, which I also had explained in my previous webinar as well. Okay, so it's basically your problem. You need to specifically mention about problem and back it up about the problem with relevant resources. Okay, and then continue on your past studies. Now, past studies, we must remember that not to be confused with the literature review. Yeah, these past studies are just to support whatever claim that you have for your problem. Okay, so what are the past studies that have been done? Okay, related. So for my area is meta discourse in business news. So then the past studies are related to meta discourse because whatever that I claimed earlier on, right? But because business news has not been thoroughly investigated, so I cannot put my past studies about business news. Okay, so I relate it to my area. Okay, and then filling in the gap elements, that is the third element. That is where we state that we want to conduct the study to fill in the gap in the literature. Okay, right. So that is for statement of problem or problem statement. Okay, so we move on with significance of the study. And in this significance of the study, we will have to actually mention who are the beneficiaries from the study. Okay, are they the curriculum designers? Are they the medical officers? Are they the educators? Are they the students? Okay, so when we do the study, we want to actually make sure that someone or some people are benefiting from what we intend to do, right? So then this is the section where you talk about your beneficiaries and how important the findings are for them. Okay, and then research questions or hypotheses. Okay, so following on from what you have mentioned, you have the research questions and hypotheses. Following also your research title. So your variables in the research title should be placed and mentioned in the research questions or hypothesis. If hypothesis is for quantitative research, okay? Right. And then the definitions of terms, like what I mentioned earlier on, whatever things, whatever words or variables that we mentioned in the research title should also be defined in the definition of terms before we move on to literature review. We just need to assume that the readers do not know. Okay, we cannot assume that they know. They actually don't know. Okay, so we have to explain it specifically. Okay, and with all the relevant resources, yeah, before we move on to literature review. Okay, let us just move on further. Okay, so statement of the problem, according to Creswell, is a problem that might be defined as an issue that exists in the literature, theory, or practice that leads to a need for the study. Yeah, so that is why when we do a study or conduct a research, is because we want to do something to help to basically solve the problem, right? So that is why Creswell mentioned this, and that's the reason why we do a research. Okay, right. And then effective problem statements answer the question, why does this research need to be conducted? Okay, and also most of the time they will say, so what? Are you sure? And so forth. Yeah, so basically this one could be explained better. Okay, make sure that you have the 3 elements. So basically it's the problem, okay, past studies, and then we have the filling in the gap elements to mention it, make it strong and concrete before you move on to your basically your purpose, and then you have your research questions and so forth. Okay, so this is very important and very fundamental. Okay, so the scope of the study is where we mentioned about significance, right? And it contains these 3 paragraphs based on these 3 questions. Okay, why the study is important. Okay, mentioned about it. Why is this study important to be conducted? Okay, how the study is important to you and to the rest. Okay, and to whom the study, for whom the study is important. Okay, so use all these guidelines, questions to help you to think and reflect on what you intend to do. Okay, we need to reflect, we need to act it out, we need to plan it, and we need to evaluate it. Okay, so all these things is very important as a researcher, okay, before conducting a research. Okay. Right, and then we move on to the objectives of the study. Right, so the objectives should be clearly stated and specific in nature. Okay, right, so at times, sometimes we have research objectives, right? We have the sub-objectives, right? In the way we have like maybe research question 1, and then research question 1A, research question 1B in a way, right? We have variables there. Okay, but each sub-objective should delineate only one issue. Okay, we don't have too many things, too many issues in one research objective, in the sub-objective, I mean. Okay, so we need to be clearly, understand in this part. Okay, right. And then we have action-oriented words such as to determine, to analyze, to ascertain. Okay, words like this. Okay, in a way for you to formulate your sub-objectives, we should be numerically stated. Okay, we should use specific words because these objectives should be attainable, measurable, achievable, and testable. Okay, we shouldn't use words like to see, to find out, to look. It's quite subjective, right? To look what? To find what? Yeah. So use more specific words like to analyze, to ascertain, to determine, to examine, to investigate, and so forth. Okay, words like this for your research objectives. Okay, so then we have research questions or hypotheses, right? So questions are very relevant to normative or census type of research. Any type of research, yeah, in any type of research, we have research questions. Okay, following what we have mentioned in the research objectives. Okay, and it should be following, yeah, must be consistent. Whatever you mention in your research objective should be mentioned in your research question. Okay, now the questions are most often used in qualitative inquiry. Okay, so in the way research questions, right? And qualitative study, like basically study when we use semi-structured interview, when we use writing prompts, when we use text, yeah, to analyze, it's all very subjective, right? So then we have research questions. Okay, but for hypothesis is where it's relevant to theoretical research and are typically used in quantitative inquiry or research. Okay, in this case, yeah, quantitative is where we will be numerically, calculating the findings, right? Using SPSS or PLS-SAM, AMOS, all the quantitative softwares, right? Okay, so in that case, we have the relationships, we have the association, and we want to determine that, we want to analyze that, and that is where hypothesis will be stated. Okay? Right, so then we have definitions. Okay, so definitions is what all key terms should be defined. Okay, all the variables should be defined. Okay, and in a hypothesis testing study, these are primarily the terms that describe the variables of the study. Okay, so basically that is what you need to do. Variables and constructs that you want to analyze, okay, in your study, you have to define it and then operationalize your terms well. Okay, and then the researcher's task is to make his or her definitions as clear as possible. Okay, assume like all of us do not know anything, yeah, just assume, write it out, yeah, in the way clearly, with supporting it with all the relevant resources before we move on to literature review, which is your chapter 2. Okay, let us just move forward for your chapter 2 right now, literature review. And this is the part where everyone else doesn't like to do it. Even me, myself, I had problems doing literature review all the way, even towards my Viva. And after Viva, when I had to submit my thesis, I had to also change my literature review. Yeah, it should be updated most of the time, yeah? Okay, so literature review, it shows that you are aware of the literature study that is required in your research area. So we will be able to find out all the related studies, okay, or research areas that have been done. Okay, so then we will see whether we could actually do something different, yeah? narrate the story of something that is different, yeah, to help the beneficiaries of your research, right? So that is where we had to, be logical and rational about it. And in my case, I also did explain in my previous webinar for literature review. Yeah, there were not many studies, done for business news. Okay, and I had problems actually reviewing my literature. I didn't know what to do, but then I had to do something about it. So I had to review some other things that are related. So business news. So talk about maybe the studies on news. So I had to talk about the news. Okay, study about news because it's related to business news. So I talk about the studies in news. Okay, then I narrow it down more. Business, but no business news studies. So I talk about business discourses, studies that have been done in business discourses like business reports, business articles. Then I had to also specify that. Okay, so that is where I had to rationalize something about it. Okay, and then sometimes along the way, that is what will happen, in literature review. Okay, then you review a substantial amount of reading materials before writing your proposal. Yeah, because this is very important. Yeah, because what if we want to do a research and suddenly all of a sudden when we check back, there are actually plenty of research that has been done before. Yeah, so what we do about it? Same, right? Same thing, same old, nothing new. Yeah, this will actually terrorize us in our viva when we want to submit our thesis. Yeah, because they say it has already been done before, so why didn't you review about it beforehand? And there's a lot of issues that I've done before, and then you're doing it again. So what? What is different about it? So that is where we need to be exhaustive, and find out all the relevant materials, to support your research. And how are you going to fill in the gap? And that is why when I see there are no past studies on business news, that is why I wanted to contribute to business news research. Okay. All right, and then it shows that you have the theoretical knowledge in your chosen research area. Okay, so then we will know what are the related theories that are available in our research area and which one will be the most dominant for our research. Okay, so we talk about the plenty of these theories that are related. Okay, and that's where we need to be very specific and sufficient about it. Okay, so by reviewing related literature at this stage, it will make you aware of some of other similar work which has been done. Okay, all the studies that have been done, expose the methodologies that have been adopted and which you may use or adapt. Okay, so there is a difference between adopt and adapt. Adopt means you use every single thing similarly. Okay, but when you want to adapt, it means you change certain parts of your data collection. So for example, in the test items, okay, when you are just following exactly the test items, you have 30 items in the test, so you must have 30. Okay, and then the options, 3 options for each item. Okay, so when you want to follow exactly, there is adopted. But when you want to do adapted, it's where maybe you want to change. Maybe 30 items are not specific for your research, not good enough, not proper. You want to reduce. Maybe you want to reduce to 10. So when you reduce your items to 10, that is where you adapt. Okay, yeah, so this is very important for us to know. What are the methodologies that could be done? Okay, and so forth. And then it will also help you to provide sources of information that you do not have yet. So because at times when we want to mention some things about it and we do not know, how to actually, is this really true? And why am I saying it correctly? Okay, because we do not want to be in trouble. Whatever that we say, when we want to publish our work as well, right? We do not want to be in trouble as a researcher. So then when we look at the past studies, okay, then that's where we can actually back up our claim. Okay. Okay, so by reviewing related literature at this stage, it will inform you if a chosen area has already been researched extensively. Okay, if it has been done, okay, maybe we can replicate the research, but change something in terms of maybe the data collection, change some things in terms of variables and so forth. Okay, and then approaches that you do not know of before, then you are able to know about it and then, in a way, contribute something about it. Okay, and you must remember that it's a literature review, it's not literature reporting, not stating every single thing that is done, okay, because we want to hear your voice. And that is where we need to mention what are the similarities and differences of your current study that you're going to research on, okay, with the past studies. Okay, what is similar, what is different? Yeah, what are the weaknesses? What are the strengths? Okay, we need to synthesize and interpret it accordingly. Okay. So now let's look at methodology. So for methodology part is to describe the data that you will use in the research and the methodology to be adopted or adapted and justify the choice of methodology. Okay, and this chapter itself is very pertinent because this is the part where you need to write it all, narrate all your stories, narrate everything, tell your story here. But when you want to tell your story, it's not free writing, yeah? It's basically we need to mention it according to the format, following the research questions. So when the research question 1, what is the variable? So we have basically the data, the samples, the data collection, the data analysis, right? And then we move on to research question 2, another variable, we have the sample, the data collection, we have the data analysis, right? Okay, so follow it and then make sure that you are able to mention about your research procedures as well. Okay, what you intend to do from the start and the end. Okay, maybe week 1 you want to do something, then week 2 you're doing something, or maybe you have a break in between because maybe there's an intervention. Intervention means it's a treatment that is conducted. Yeah, maybe you want to help to do something, create awareness about certain particular features. Okay, so and then is to inform readers the types of data going to be collected. Okay, whether they are the qualitative data or whether it's the quantitative data. Okay, so we need to mention about this. Okay, and then research procedure. Okay, so basically your data collection or your instruments. Whether it's interviews, observations, questionnaires, and so forth. Okay, and we need to justify why are we using this. Okay, right. So if outside organizations are involved, now we have to explain how are we going to get hold of the data. Okay, and then in the previous webinar also I mentioned something that if sometimes along the way we cannot go to the school, maybe at that period of time we were not allowed to go to the school. We are not allowed to go to the school. So what should we do? Maybe you could employ or hire another educator, yeah, to help us to collect the data and so forth. This all should be reported in the methodology part. Okay, now if you need to report whether you are there to collect the data or other people are there to collect the data for you. Okay, this is very important. So just specifically mention every single thing that is going to be done. Okay, so this chapter indicates why the methodology is used. Okay, so tell all your stories. Okay, now if existing methodology is not to be used, then explain why you need to use an adopted or adapted methodology. Okay, then basically remember adopted, you just adopt it verbatim, right? Word by word without changing anything. Then explain why are you adopting it. Okay, but if adapting it, you are changing some parts of it. Why are you modifying and revising it? Why? So we need to basically explain it. Okay? Right. So this is the part where it's a question and answer session. Now, before I pass this over to Miss Grace, yeah, let me just conclude by stating that, in the research proposal, normally we need to check the guidelines and requirements from our university. Okay, so basically back then when I was doing my PhD, I was doing it at UPM. So at UPM, we do not need to write a concrete research proposal before our proposal defense. We have a very brief research proposal only. Okay, and then we had to actually submit an extract summary of our research. Okay, to be approved. Then only we go to then we went through our proposal defense, proposal presentation. Okay, so that is where after our proposal defense, we had to actually write out 3 chapters, which is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, to make sure that it's very concretely done. Okay, before moving to comprehensive examination. And in this comprehensive examination, it's like a pre-viva. When we can actually get it approved, everything is done perfectly well, then we can actually move on to the data collection. So this is for UPM. Then I believe in other universities there are different requirements. Maybe in USM, there might be 3 chapters to be submitted before the proposal defense and so forth. So they need to check it out. So it's not like, in one university is like this, and then whenever I'm saying, oh, you just follow what I say. No, no, no. We need to check it out. They follow the requirements and the guidelines of the university. Okay, and also at times, maybe some of you are still considering, before embarking on your postgraduate journey, especially for those final year students who maybe just recently graduated, or some of you who intend to embark into your postgraduate journey, So we want to basically apply to a master's or PhD program, right? So what should we do? Maybe sometimes there's a brief proposal that we need to input about 4 pages or 5 pages, right? So what should we input? So brief, right? What should we input? Yeah, so most important thing when you want to input, basically we need to talk about the problem statement. This is very important. What is the problem? Okay. And then after that, your research questions and your research objective together with the significance to be discussed. And then literature review, maybe 3 or 4 studies that have been related to your research area. And then continue on with your methodology part. Talk about your data collection, your instruments to be used specifically. So in a way, it's basically 4 to 5 pages, waiting for it to be approved before you embark yourself into your research journey, your postgraduate journey all the way. So, and also at the end of the day, proposal defense is also very important because the proposal defense is not approved or you do not pass. It's very hard for you to continue our data collection. All right. So thanks for listening. It's very technical today because it's all about research proposal. All right. So now I'll hand this over to Miss Grace, and any questions are always welcome. Yeah.